Creamer Media's Mining Weekly Online is interviewing Namibian Marine Phosphate CEO Chris Jordanson and COO Mike Woodburn on the company's seabed phosphates project in Namibia. Namibian Marine owns Sandpiper Marine Phosphate project. It's about 60 kilometers off the coast of Namibia. Can you tell me what the current status of that project is? Where does it stand?
So the current status of the project, unfortunately, it's currently on hold. We are currently in court on a number of matters. But more recently, the Ministry of Environment and Tourism actually set aside our environmental clearance certificate. So we're going through a process of working with the Ministry of Environmental and Tourism to actually get it reinstated.
Okay, but it's, as you speak now, if it is reinstated, how ready is this project to go?
It's been ready since 2012. So by saying that, there's a lot of work to be done, and it will take 2 years to develop the project. We've also got to do the land-based part of the project as well. So we've got a lot to do, but it's about 2 years and we could be in production.
Okay, great. This has seemed to have caused some back and forth and quite a bit of delays, as you've just mentioned now. How are you mitigating these delays?
Mitigating the delays have been very hard, okay, because when you go through a court process, you're in that process, and you have to obviously wait and see how the results of that come out. So we found it very difficult to mitigate it. But the shareholders, as well as obviously employees, believe in the project to see it go forward. It's a good project. The project fundamentals are excellent. And I think we've just got to persevere with the path we've taken and see where we end up.
Okay, great. Why is this so controversial?
Look, there's a lot of emotion around the project. And the emotion is not necessarily based on scientific fact. And we've done a lot of work, and Mike will cover that when you sit down and talk to him, from the environmental perspective, which hasn't necessarily been made public by the Namibian government. The documents in relation to all the environmental work we've done are available. They are publicly available documents. And we haven't shied away from doing the work that's required. We've done the required public consultations under the Environmental Act and so forth. But unfortunately, the emotion behind the project is what's actually slowing it down and made it more controversial.
You spoke earlier to the importance of this project and that it is a good project. What is so important about this project and why do we need it?
Well, if you look at food security, it's obviously one of the major factors driving the world currently. And if we talk about events in recent environmental events that have been publicised, everybody's talking about the Amazon forest in Brazil being removed. So what we've got to do is we've got to create a situation where we get better yields from the fields. And that involves fertiliser and adding nutrients to the fields to make sure that obviously we get the right yields from what we sow, so to speak. The phosphate's clearly one of those items that goes into fertiliser, and that is why it's important. Now this project itself is important for Namibia as well, because clearly it will add jobs. It will add international revenue. It'll give them international focus, and it's not a small investment. So from that perspective, it's also very good for Namibia. So it has many positives towards what it's there for, and hopefully we can develop it soon.
Just looking at the funding arrangements you have in place, I mean, how much is this costing you, the delays? How much will the project itself cost you in totality, and how are the funding arrangements structured? So
back in 2012. We effectively completed a feasibility study which showed that the project was both technically and economically feasible. We'd worked with the South African banks, and we had a syndicate of South African banks who were actually willing to fund the project. Back in 2012, the project funding required was around about $400 million, of which that was 236 in the capital side, and obviously the working capital was on top of that. In putting the funding together, clearly you're looking at a debt and equity sort of structured package. The shareholders are willing, obviously, to back the equity side, and we'll work with the banks to obviously raise the debt side. So the delays have been unfortunate and obviously are costly. To date, we've invested over $1 billion Namibian on the project. So if you say your cost of capital is 8%, then effectively we're looking at $8 million a year in cost of capital. So it's extremely costly for us. But having said that, as I said earlier, the shareholders are here to support the project. They believe in it, and that's how we're mitigating it.
Right, and then last question really is, what future do you see for the company? I mean, when you get started, do you see this all resolving quickly and amicably, or will it drag on for some time still?
Look, clearly we hope it doesn't drag on for any time longer than what it necessarily has to. The company has a positive future. I think once we get into production and people understand what work we've put into the environmental side of the project to make sure that we will be responsible from both a marine and terrestrial perspective, and we educate effectively the general public, I think, as a whole, I think that will improve the sentiment toward the project, and hopefully people will realise that we aren't there as a fly-by-night type of project. We are there for the long term, and we have the Namibian economy and environment firmly in our minds to make sure we do the right thing.
And now we'll be speaking to Mike Woodburn. Welcome.
Thanks, Natasha. Great to be here.
Thanks. Now, the company's plan to undertake phosphate seafloor mining has drawn fierce opposition. Can you maybe tell me a little bit about what that is about?
Look, I think it's based on a large amount of misinformation that's out there, placing mining in opposition to fishing, when that's not necessarily the case at all. Namibia has seabed mining that happens at present. It's one of the world's leading ocean diamond mining companies, if not the leading one, with a well-established industry. And this is another project that's fitting into the seabed mining framework, different mineral, and there's a lot of misinformation that is potentially driving some of the opposition to the project.
And at the moment, there's a court case underway. Can you tell me a little bit about that court case that was headed into after the environmental clearance in 2016?
Yes, I think as the matter is sub judice, obviously we're limited in what we can say, but it's public knowledge that the Confederation of Fishing Companies have taken out an action to prevent the operation going forward, challenging the mining license. And there was an opposition to the award of the clearance certificate, which led to a series of actions, both through the Environmental Act provisions, as well as the courts, which has resulted recently in the clearance certificate being revoked, and a new process of consultation being invoked by the Minister of Environment, and that was completed in December 2018.
And now, with those public hearings, the public consultation that you've undergone, what is the outcome of them? There was a few months of a waiting period. Are they in their review now?
That's correct. We're currently awaiting the outcome of the public consultation, the feedback, and the assessment by the Environmental Commissioner on the outcome of that appeal and the decision on the clearance certificate.
How long does that usually take?
There are gazetted periods for these things, but I think we're dealing with unusual circumstances. Certainly the level of public interest has had an impact on the process, and I think that's what is driving these things into timeframes that are much longer than many of us would like, but we need to stick to the processes and follow the procedures, so that's what we'll do.
But obviously these delays have had some impact on the company. Would you be able to quantify what kind of impact these have had?
Certainly the major impact is that we haven't been able to develop the project into its next set of logical steps, take it forward into funding, create the employment, create the development around the land-based operations that we'd like to have seen. But we want to complete the environmental processes and the permitting processes for the marine side thoroughly and completely before we go into those. And certainly we have had to endure certain setbacks in terms both financially and time-wise in the process.
Right, and there's also been some talk of a moratorium that's in place. Can you tell me what the confusion about that is?
Yes, there was a moratorium announced through Cabinet on the issuing of environmental clearance certificates for bulk seabed mining, including phosphate. It was for 18 months, during the period from about I think it expired in 2015 in April. Currently, there's no moratorium on the table officially, so we are perplexed as to where that notion comes from.
Okay, there's no indication of where it could have come from, or it's just...
Certainly there are announcements made in the media by the Ministry of Fisheries that there is a moratorium, but as I say, we are aware of, and we have not been advised of any new moratorium, and the moratorium that was in place expired after the 18-month period was completed.
Now, obviously there's a lot of public perception that it can either be mining or fishing in Namibia on the specific coastline. Can you tell me, what are you doing to bring about awareness to the public? What are you doing to actually mitigate this perception and their reactions?
We're making a big effort to ensure that the correct information and facts are out there. We would like people to develop their opinions around facts and not misinformation. In particular, this case of fishing or seabed mining seems to often omit the fact that there is a scale involved, and the scale of the operations has not been properly considered in many cases when broad statements of impact are made. That's fundamentally one of the major issues we've got. Secondly, as I mentioned, seabed mining is nothing new to Namibia. The excavation of the seabed for diamonds is a form of dredging, and the excavation of the seabed for recovery of sediment for phosphate is equally a dredging operation. So it's not anything new in terms of technique for recovering material off the seabed. So for those reasons, I think, and a number of other points that have been taken out of context, there can be, and there has been, a lot of misinformation, and therefore a lot of concern.
And then just to look at the environmental implications of it, are there any environmental worries that we need to be concerned about going forward with this type of project?
The process of assessing the impacts and the concerns that the public have are addressed through the consultation process for the environmental clearance certificate application. It's very well regulated in Namibia. There's a very well defined process whereby all of those concerns are raised, and they are then subjected to substantial investigation on impacts by an appointed environmental assessment practitioner, who in turn appoints a number of specialists to look at specific aspects of the project. In this case, it would have been fisheries, plumes, sediments, etc. We have done that process thoroughly. We did it in 2012. We subsequently developed a further program of work, having had further consultation with the government, with interested and affected parties, and did a verification of the impact assessments done in 2012. Those were submitted in 2014. We do know that several independent external reviews of the assessment have been done, all of which resulted in the award of the clearance certificate in 2016, and as is well known, it was then challenged. But that is an indication of the kind of processes that do go on in the background, that are done in a thorough and professional way by very qualified professionals that are seeking to give a very unbiased and clear assessment of what those impacts would be. So if there were any major concerns, they would have come out in that process, and they would have been flagged and dealt with. They are brought forward into a management plan, and that management plan covers every aspect of the operation, the monitoring that needs to be done, and is legally binding once your clearance certificate is awarded.
Fantastic. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think Namibia has taken a bold step to become a leading diamond mining company, and is proudly looking at the fact that seabed mining will be the future for diamond mining. We would hope that projects like this can contribute to the continued growth of Namibia and maintain its position in the forefront of seabed mining.
Thank you. That was Creamer Media's Mining Weekly Online in conversation with Namibian Marine Phosphate CEO Chris Jordanson and COO Mike Woodburn.